They say the hardest day of a woman's life is when she buries her husband. I always thought that would be true for me too. But on the day of Michael's funeral, I learned the hardest day isn't when you bury him, it's when you discover that maybe, just maybe, you buried the wrong man. The morning began in a haze of black clothing, murmured condolences, and the overpowering perfume of lilies. I walked into the church, clutching the program like it was a shield. Michael's picture stared back at me from the front cover. That mischievous half-smile, half-secret, half-comfort. A smile that always made me feel like he knew something I didn't. And maybe he always did. Everywhere I turned, people whispered soft phrases. He was such a good man. So sudden, so tragic. You were lucky to have him. Their voices blurred together like static in my ears. I tried to nod, to play the role of the grieving widow. But inside, a voice whispered something else. Too neat, too sudden. You see, my husband's death hadn't felt real from the start. One moment he was alive, working late hours in that locked office of his. The next, I was told his heart had given out of his desk. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. Just gone. Or so I thought. The pastor's voice echoed through the vaulted ceiling. We gather here to celebrate the life of Michael Evans, beloved husband, father, and friend. Beloved husband. The words twisted in my chest. Because Michael was many things, yes, but beloved? He had been distant too, secretive. Late-night phone calls that ended when I entered the room. Files on his computer I wasn't allowed to see. An office door that stayed locked. I had convinced myself it was just stress. Work. A man protecting me from things I didn't need to know. But sitting there in the front pew, I wondered if I had been blind all along. I slid into my seat, my fingers digging into my handbag. One eulogy followed another, co-workers praising his brilliance, friends painting him larger than life. Each word sounded like it belonged to someone I didn't truly know. And then, during the final hymn, when the whole church rose to sing Amazing Grace, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Who texts during a funeral? But something made me look. Something told me I had to. When I saw the message, my breath froze in my throat. I'm still alive. Trust no one. The world tilted. My knees weakened. My heart pounded so loudly I thought people around me could hear it. I read it once. Twice. A third time. The letters didn't change. This wasn't a mistake. Not a prank. Not a mis-sent joke. It was sharp. Cold. Real. I looked around the church, panic clawing up my throat. My sister was singing with her eyes closed. My son sat stiff, tears streaking his cheek. Friends swayed gently to the hymn. No one looked at me. No one looked suspicious. But someone knew. Someone had sent that message. And if it was true, if Michael was alive, then who was lying inside that coffin at the front of the church? The hymn ended. The service closed. People shook my hands, embraced me, whispered words I didn't hear. My body moved like a puppet's, smiling, nodding, thanking. But inside, a storm raged. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, I wanted to scream, "Stop! This isn't right." But my lips stayed sealed. Who would believe me? A grieving widow claiming her husband was alive, based on a single text. They'd call me hysterical. Broken. Delusional. So I stayed silent. Later, at the house, people filled my kitchen with casseroles and pies. Neighbors hugged me. Friends told me to stay strong. I nodded, smiled, pretended to eat. But my eyes never left my phone. No second message came. Only that single, haunting text. Hours later, when the house was empty, I locked myself in my room and stared at the screen. The words burned into my mind, "I'm still alive. Trust no one." If it was Michael, why had he let me bury him? Why let me stand over a coffin and whisper goodbye? Why not reveal himself sooner? And why warn me against everyone else? And if it wasn't him, who would be so cruel? I thought of the man I once caught watching our house from across the street. The late-night phone calls Michael wouldn't explain. The office door that stayed locked. His death that came too suddenly, too perfectly timed. The puzzle pieces didn't fit. Unless his death wasn't real at all. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, clutching the phone like a lifeline. My heart warred between terror and hope. Was my husband truly alive? And if he was, did I even know the man I had loved all these years? By morning, one truth was clear. My life had split in two. There was the world everyone else believed in, the widow, the coffin, the funeral. And then there was the world of that single text message. A world where Michael Evans was still alive. The funeral was over. The coffin was buried. But for me, the story was only beginning. The days leading up to the funeral blurred together in a fog of grief, paperwork, and autopilot movements. People praised me for how strong I was being, but strength had nothing to do with it. I wasn't strong, I was numb. My body went through the motions of flower arrangements, guest lists, and meetings with the pastor. But my heart was still frozen in that sterile hospital room, staring at Michael's body lying motionless on the bed. Even then, something about that moment hadn't felt right. I remembered reaching for his hand, expecting it to still be warm, but it was already cold. Too cold, too fast. The doctors brushed it off as natural. I told myself not to question it. But now, looking back, maybe that was the first sign. On the morning of the funeral, I woke with an uneasy stillness pressing against my chest. The air felt heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I told myself it was grief manifesting in strange ways. Still, the knot in my stomach refused to untangle. By the time I reached the church, the place was already filling with casseroles, murmurs, and tear-streaked faces. Every hug, every whispered condolence sliced through me like shards of glass. The organ hummed softly. His casket gleamed under the dim light, draped with flowers. I sat in the front row, folding my hands so tightly they ached, my wedding ring pressing into my skin until it left a mark. I stared at that casket, at the polished wood hiding the man who was supposed to grow old with me. The man who once promised me forever. And then it happened. Halfway through the service, as the pastor spoke about eternal rest, my purse buzzed. A tiny vibration against the solemn silence. I almost ignored it. But something in me, call it instinct, call it fate, compelled me to reach for it. Shielding the phone beneath the hymn book, I pulled it out. At first, I thought my eyes were betraying me. The sender's name, his name. Michael. I froze, my pulse slamming in my ears. I blinked. Maybe it was an old message resurfacing. Maybe my phone was glitching. But no, this was new. Fresh. Stamped with the exact time of that moment. With trembling fingers, I opened it. And my world collapsed. I am still alive. Trust no one. The words glared at me from the screen, sharp as blades. My breath hitched. My vision swam. For a moment, I thought I might faint right there in the pew. The pastor's voice became muffled, like I was suddenly underwater. The faces around me blurred. All I could see were those words. How? How could this be? Michael was dead. I had seen his body. I had signed the papers. His casket was right there. So how could he be texting me? My hands went clammy. I nearly dropped the phone. Somehow, I locked the screen and slid it back into my purse, forcing my face into a mask of grief so no one would see the horror clawing at me inside. A few people glanced at me, no doubt assuming my pallor was just grief overwhelming me again. If only they knew the truth. My reality had just splintered into pieces. And then, like a hammer striking my chest, the second part of the message sank in. Trust no one. Not I love you. Not I'm safe. Not even wait for me. Just those 3 chilling words. Trust no one. I sat frozen in that pew, surrounded by family and friends, but suddenly utterly alone. My eyes scanned the congregation. My sister, eyes closed, singing softly. My son, stiff and pale, clutching the program with trembling hands. My daughter-in-law, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. To everyone else, this was grief. To me, it was suspicion. Who was I not supposed to trust? Was it them? Was it everyone? The rest of the service was a blur. I stood when told, sat when guided, nodded at hymns. My son ended up reading the eulogy I had written because my voice shook too violently. People thought it was grief silencing me. In truth, it was terror. As the pallbearers carried the casket out, my legs felt like lead. I followed, each step echoing like a drumbeat of dread. At the graveside, as the coffin was lowered, I couldn't bring myself to look down. Instead, I scanned faces. My daughter-in-law's eyes flicked toward my purse for a split second. Did she know? Was she checking if I had seen it? Or was my mind unraveling? My eldest son placed a firm hand on my shoulder. His grip lingered too long. Comfort or warning? I no longer knew the difference. When the earth began to cover the coffin, a horrifying thought clawed at me. What if the man in that box wasn't Michael at all? The ceremony ended. People dispersed. My family urged me to return home for the reception, but I couldn't. I needed space. I needed answers. Only when I slipped into the solitude of my car did I dare pull the phone back out. The message was still there. Not a dream. Not a hallucination. Real. I am still alive. Trust no one. I scrolled to the sender's number. My stomach flipped. It was his. The same number saved in my phone for years. But wait, had his phone ever been returned to me? The hospital had given me his wallet, his wedding ring, a few personal items. But his phone? No. That had never come back. I dialed it in a rush of desperation. 1 ring. 2. 3. It connected. Hello? My whisper cracked with fear. Michael? Is it you? Please say something. Nothing. Just silence. Then faint static, like a weak signal, teasing me with the presence of someone on the other end. And then, click. The line went dead. I sat frozen, clutching the phone to my chest like it was my only lifeline. My tears came, but they weren't grief anymore. They were confusion, fear, and in God help me, hope. Could it be true? Could Michael really be alive? And if so, why warn me? Who was I supposed to mistrust? The very people sitting by my side? As I drove home from the cemetery, the black veil of widowhood still draped across me. One realization burned hotter than all the others. If Michael was alive, then I hadn't just been grieving a husband. I had been living inside a lie. And whoever crafted that lie was close. Too close. The funeral was over. But my nightmare had just begun. The drive home from the funeral should have been silent, an exhausted widow returning to an empty house, collapsing into grief and solitude. That was what everyone expected of me. That was what I expected of myself. But instead, my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned bone white, and one question looped endlessly in my mind like a broken record. What if he's alive? By the time my tires crunched against the gravel of my driveway, I had already made 2 decisions. If the message was real, someone wanted me to know he wasn't dead. If it wasn't real, then someone was playing a cruel, deliberate trick. Either way, silence was no longer an option. Inside the house, I shut every curtain, locked every door, and turned off every light until the rooms were bathed in heavy shadows. I sat at the kitchen table with only a single lamp glowing, my phone lying in front of me like an unexploded bomb. I read the message again, and again, and again. Short, urgent, written exactly the way he always wrote when danger was near. My husband had never been a man of excess words. He believed in efficiency, especially when lives were on the line. But was it really him? I scrolled through old texts, matching phrases, rhythms, even the stubborn little quirks. He always typed no one instead of nobody. Never used emojis. Never wasted space. Whoever had sent that message knew him. The realization made my pulse quicken. Because if it wasn't him, then who? The next morning, I drove to the place I had avoided like the plague, the hospital where he died. The fluorescent lights seemed colder than before, buzzing like angry insects above my head. I approached the front desk, forcing steadiness into my voice. "ID like my husband's medical records," I said. The receptionist raised a brow. "For insurance?" "Yes." The lie slid off my tongue too easily. Minutes later, a folder was pressed into my hands. I carried it like contraband out to my car, unable to wait. My fingers shook as I opened it. Time of death, 3:42 a.m. Cause, cardiac arrest following organ failure. Pronounced by Dr. Miller. It was all so clean. So final. Too final. And yet, I couldn't recall ever meeting this Dr. Miller. Through all those endless nights, I remembered nurses, specialists, tired faces. But not his. Had I been too exhausted to notice? Or was he never really there? The neatness of the file unsettled me more than grief ever had. That evening, my son came over. Normally his presence comforted me. But tonight, after that message, I saw him through different eyes. "Mom," he said softly, placing his hand on mine. "You're pushing yourself too hard. You need to rest." His words were gentle, but the phrase he chose lodged like a splinter in my mind. We need to let him go. Too rehearsed. Too final. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to show him the message. To beg him for answers. But those 3 words echoed in my head, trust no one. So I stayed silent. But suspicion had already sunk its claws into me. The following days, when people thought I was grieving, I was investigating. Quietly. Patiently. At the funeral home, I asked strange questions, pretending it was for closure. The mortician's words chilled me to the bone. We never actually saw him at the hospital. The body came to us sealed. Sealed. Why sealed? Unless it wasn't him in that casket. Desperation made me bold. I reached out to one of my husband's old friends, a retired cop. I told him I was being harassed and asked if he could trace the number. A half-truth wrapped in urgency. Days later, he called. "This is odd," he said. The phone's pinging from multiple locations. First near the hospital. Then the old docks. It's moving, like someone doesn't want to be found. The hairs on my neck stood up. If this was a prank, it was elaborate. If it wasn't, my husband was alive, on the run, and reaching out. But why not come home to me? One night, I drove to the docks. I told myself it was foolish, but my heart wouldn't let me stay away. Through the fog, I saw him. Or at least, a man shaped like him. Hood pulled low, shoulders hunched, standing near the edge of the pier. I slowed the car. My hand trembled on the door handle. But before I could step out, the man turned and walked away, swallowed by mist. Was it him? Or a ghost my mind had conjured out of desperation? Days passed in silence. Until, one night, as I sat at the kitchen table with the file spread before me, the phone buzzed again. My heart nearly stopped. Another message. Short. terrifying. They will come for you. Be ready. I dropped the phone onto the table, my hands trembling violently. Who were they? And why would they come for me? The room suddenly felt smaller. The shadows longer. The silence louder. And in that moment, one truth crystallized in my mind. This was no longer about grief. This was no longer about doubt. This was survival. And whatever danger my husband had been running from, it had now found me. Have you ever been so close to the truth that it burned your skin, yet everyone you love begged you to look away? That's where I was. Haunted by warnings, pulled between shadows and family ties. But the night I decided to confront it all, the lies, the betrayals, the whispers, I realized something terrifying. The people you trust most can sometimes be the ones who destroy you. The second message didn't just unsettle me, it shattered me. They will come for you. Be ready. Those 6 words carved themselves into my mind like a gravestone epitaph. Sleep? Impossible. Food? Forgotten. My life shrank to the 4 corners of my home, doors bolted, curtains sealed, phone clutched like a lifeline. I was a prisoner inside my own house, waiting for an enemy I couldn't even name. And yet, fear has a strange gravity. It doesn't just paralyze, it pulls you closer to the very thing you want to avoid. After a week of silence, my fear hardened into something sharper. I couldn't just sit in the dark anymore. I had to act. Whoever left me that message wasn't telling me to hide. They were warning me to prepare. Prepare for the truth. My first stop was the hospital. Again. But this time, I wasn't the grieving widow whispering questions like prayers to ghosts. No, I walked into that building like a storm. Straight to the administrator's office. I need to see Dr. Miller, I demanded. The man who pronounced my husband dead. The administrator blinked at me like I was speaking another language. I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have a Dr. Miller on staff. Her words hit me like a brick. What do you mean? His name is in the file. He signed the death certificate. Her brow furrowed. We've never employed a physician by that name. I felt the ground tilt. My pulse roared in my ears. Then who signed my husband's death certificate? She hesitated just a second too long. You should speak with the legal department. But I didn't stay. I couldn't. My body moved before my brain caught up. I stormed out, clutching the folder so tightly my knuckles burned. Dr. Miller didn't exist. His name had been fabricated, borrowed, or worse, invented. If the doctor wasn't real, then maybe my husband's death wasn't real either. That night, the pull of the docks was irresistible. The place where the phone had pinged. I parked my car in the shadows, engine off, eyes glued to the mist rolling across the water. Hours bled together. The occasional truck headlights. The mournful cries of gulls. The cold seeped into my bones, but I stayed. Waiting. And then I saw him. Or at least, I thought I did. A tall man, moving like a shadow stitched into the fog. His shoulders hunched, his stride cautious. My heart slammed against my ribs. James. The name tore from my throat before I could stop it. The figure froze. For one suspended second, it was him. I knew it. The outline. The posture. My husband. But then he bolted. James. Stop. I chased him down the pier, lungs on fire, legs screaming. But he was too fast. Younger, or maybe just more desperate. By the time I reached the end, he was gone, swallowed by fog and silence. I collapsed against the railing, chest heaving. That wasn't random. That wasn't a ghost. It was him. Alive. Hiding. Running. But why? The next morning, my son came by again. He looked exhausted, jittery, eyes darting around like a man watching shadows crawl closer. "Mom," he said slowly, "you have to stop digging into Dad's is passing. It's not healthy." There it was again. The insistence. The warning dressed up as concern. I set a mug of coffee in front of him. "Why are you so afraid of me asking questions?" He flinched. "Because you're spiraling. You're seeing things that aren't there. Dad's gone. We need to move forward." My patience snapped. "What if he's not gone?" I asked. His head jerked up. Fear flickered across his face, not disbelief, not pity. "Fear? You know something." My voice dropped to a whisper. He shoved back his chair. "Stop this. Please, Mom. Just a stop." But his hands shook as he gripped the table edge. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Who are you protecting?" I demanded. "Me or him?" He didn't answer. He just left. The slam of the door rattled the walls. And in the silence he left behind, my certainty grew. He knew. The next message came like a blade in the dark. "Bank. Look under my name." I stared at the words until my vision blurred. Then, trembling, I opened the banking app. And there it was. A hidden account. Layers of security shielding it. Transactions that smelled like preparation, withdrawals, transfers, cash. The last withdrawal? 2 days before the funeral. My breath hitched. He wasn't just alive. Had planned this. Carefully. I printed every record, spread them across my dining table like shards of glass. My husband hadn't died. Had staged his own death. And my son, my own son, was in on it. I couldn't take the silence anymore. If James was alive, I had to see him. I went back to the docks. Left a note taped to a lamppost. "If you're alive, meet me here. Midnight. Alone." I didn't know if he'd come. I didn't know if I'd survive if he did. But at midnight, under the fog-drenched lights, I saw him step out of the shadows. It was him. My husband. Older, thinner, eyes hollow. But him. "James," I whispered. "Don't say my name," he hissed, glancing over his shoulder. "They're watching." I wanted to run into his arms, scream at him, collapse into him, but his fear kept me frozen. "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why put me through this?" His hands gripped my shoulders, trembling. I had no choice. They wanted me dead. If I didn't disappear, you would have been next. "Who?" I demanded. He swallowed hard. "People close. Too close. That's why I told you, trust no one." My stomach nodded. "Our son?" His silence was the loudest answer of all. Headlights swept across the dock. Tires screeched. "Mom." My son's voice cut through the night. He stumbled out of the car, pale, desperate. "Get away from him. He's dangerous." "No," I cried. "He's your father. You knew he was alive." James' voice was sharp. "He's working with them." My son's jaw clenched. "You don't understand. He got mixed with dangerous people. If they know he's alive, we're all dead." The ground tilted beneath me. Father against son. Lies against lies. But before I could demand answers, another car roared in. Blacked out windows. Men in masks poured out, guns flashing in the dark. "They found me," James whispered. And then the night erupted in gunfire. James yanked me behind a stack of crates. Bullets rang out, sparks flying off metal beams. My son ducked for cover, torn between shielding me and stopping his father. This was it, the confrontation I'd been dreading. For the first time, I understood the message completely. Trust no one. And in that storm of gunfire and betrayal, one truth burned brighter than all the others. If I didn't choose who to believe right now, then none of us would live to see tomorrow. The funeral may have ended, but grief hadn't buried anything. If anything, it unearthed horrors I was never meant to see. My husband's death was supposed to be the end of a chapter. Instead, it was the beginning of a book written in shadows, lies, and blood. And now, every knock at my door, every whisper in the dark, every familiar face, felt like part of a conspiracy I was never meant to survive. The message "I am still alive, trust no one," had rewired my life. Nights became unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards made me sit upright, heart thrashing against my ribs. I'd stare at my phone like it held my sanity hostage, waiting for another sign. And then, one night, it came. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 again. Not a neighbor. Not the police. Something deliberate. Something meant for me. I crept down the hall, each step heavier than the last, and pressed my palm against the cold brass of the doorknob. "Who is it?" My voice trembled in the stillness. Silence. Then the faint scrape of paper sliding beneath the door. An envelope. Sealed with red wax. No name. No address. My fingers shook as I tore it open. A single photograph. My husband. Alive. Hollow-eyed, seated in a bare room under a dangling light bulb, with 2 faceless men looming behind him. On the back, scrawled in jagged ink, "You're not ready to know everything. But the truth is closer than you think." My breath left me in ragged shudders. Proof. Real proof. But proof of what? A man alive, or a man held captive? I hid the photo like it was contraband. The police wouldn't believe me. My friends would call it delusion. So I became my own detective. His old office became my battlefield. At first glance, it was meticulous, files neatly labeled, calendars orderly. But when I dug deeper, cracks appeared. Receipts from places Head never mentioned. Meetings that didn't match his schedule. Phone numbers with no names. This wasn't the life of an ordinary husband. This was a man with a second life. And then I found it. A folder marked with nothing more than a black slash of ink. Inside, documents from a private security firm. Their name appeared again and again in notes written partly in his hand. The words "Specialized Global Solutions" were printed across their letterhead. One contract caught my eye. Dates that matched his unexplained absences. But the service wasn't medical or financial. It was for asset protection and removal. My stomach churned. Who was the asset? Him? Or someone Head sworn to protect? And those men in the photo, were they his captors? Or his colleagues? Before I could make sense of it, my phone buzzed. A new message. Not text. A voice recording. I pressed play. His voice. My husband's voice. "Listen carefully," he said, his tone raw, frayed with urgency. "You're in danger. They know you're looking. Don't trust the police. Don't trust our family. Don't trust anyone. Everything you've been told is a lie. I can't explain yet, but when the time comes, you'll know. Just stay alive." Then silence. The phone slipped from my hand. Tears blurred my vision. It was him. Not a hoax. Not my grief breaking my mind. He was alive, and he was warning me. But the words "don't trust our family" hit harder than any bullet. I called my son, invited him over. My voice steady, but my hands shaking under the table. He came late, eyes restless, clothes rumbled. He looked like a man already hiding from something. We sat at the dining table. The air between us was brittle glass. I need to ask you something, I said. What do you know about your father's death? He stiffened. What do you mean? He's gone. We buried him. I leaned forward, locking my eyes on his. Don't lie to me. I've seen the photo. I've heard his voice. For a split second, guilt flickered across his face like a crack in a mask. His fists tightened. His lips pressed shut. You shouldn't have gotten involved, he muttered. The words sliced me open. What have you done? He shot up, his chair clattering backward. It's not what you think. You don't understand. Dad wasn't who you thought he was. And if you keep digging, you'll end up just like him. Tears stung my eyes. He was my husband. Your father. Tell me the truth. But instead of answers, I got the slam of a door and the echo of his footsteps fading into the night. I stood trembling in the wreckage of silence. My son knew. He was hiding something so dangerous that fear clung to him like smoke. That night, my husband's warning replayed on a loop in my mind. Don't trust our family. Was my son complicit? Or just another pawn in this game? And what about my daughter? Did she know too? The thought shattered me. Had everyone I loved built their lives on a lie I wasn't allowed to see? But grief, fear, even betrayal, they couldn't smother me anymore. Not now. If they thought I would stop, they were wrong. I would confront the faceless men. The private firm. The ones who had taken my husband, or who had helped him vanish. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know if I'd survive. But I knew one thing, I would tear open this conspiracy, even if the truth destroyed me. The days after my confrontation with my son passed like smoke, thick, suffocating, impossible to breathe, impossible to see through. And through it all, my husband's voice haunted me. Don't trust the police. Don't trust our family. Don't trust anyone. How do you live like that? How does a woman who built her entire world around family suddenly accept that love has been replaced with masks and betrayal? Yet the evidence screamed the truth. The photograph slipped under my door, the voice recording with his desperate warning, the guilty look in my son's eyes. And still, something inside me refused to break. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the last thread of love clinging to the man I buried. But I knew one thing. If my husband was alive, if my family had betrayed me, then I would rip the truth from the shadows, even if it left me in pieces. It came 3 nights later. The house was dead quiet, every tick of the clock loud enough to make me flinch when it happened again. The knock. 3 times. Pause. 3 again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened the door. A stranger stood there. Tall, sharp-boned, with a scar cutting across his cheek. His eyes were cold, his presence heavier than the night itself. Without a word, he handed me a small black envelope and whispered, "It's time." And just like that, he melted into the dark. My fingers trembled as I tore the seal. Inside was a slip of paper with only an address and a time. No names. No explanations. Just a command. My heart screamed trap. My instincts screamed danger. But my soul whispered truth. So I went. The address led to a decaying warehouse on the outskirts of town, broken windows glinting like jagged teeth. My headlights sliced through the darkness, and as I stepped out, the night swallowed me whole. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "In here." For a breathless moment, nothing. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows inside, and my world split apart. It was him. My knees nearly buckled. Tears blurred my sight. My lips formed his name, but sound barely escaped. He looked older, thinner. His shoulders hunched with exhaustion, his face hollowed by shadows I couldn't name. But it was him. The man I had kissed goodnight 1,000 times. The man I had buried. Alive. I stumbled forward, but he raised a hand sharply. Don't. His voice was broken glass, familiar, but jagged. Don't come closer. My heart ripped open. Why? Why did you let me believe you were dead? Why torture me like this? His jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a guilt I didn't understand. Because the moment you knew the truth, you stopped being safe. His words spilled out like poison and salvation all at once. Before me, he wasn't just my husband. He was a man with a past I had never truly known. He confessed he once worked for the very firm I had discovered, the private security company, the faceless organization that pulled invisible strings across the world. He wasn't just an employee. He was their operative. A ghost. A weapon. And ghosts aren't allowed to retire. They wanted me back, he whispered. One last job. I refused. That's when they staged my death. The coffin, the funeral, it was all theater. They erased me from the world so they could use me in theirs. My chest caved in. All those years, the dinners, the laughter, the family holidays, they were real, weren't they? Or had they been his mask? And our children? My voice cracked, trembling with desperate hope. Silence. That silence told me more than words ever could. They didn't have a choice, he said finally. They grew up under my shadow. When the firm came, they pulled them in too. Our son tried to shield you the only way he could, by lying. The betrayal cut deeper than knives. My son. My daughter. The family I had built brick by brick now revealed as a house of cards. He stepped closer, his eyes wild with urgency. You have two paths, he said. Walk away now, bury this night, and live whatever life they'll permit you. Or... His voice dropped to a near whisper. Stand with me. Help me bring them down. But if you do, there's no going back. I stood frozen, my pulse pounding like war drums. I saw two lives stretched before me, one safe but false, the other true but fatal. And I realized, in that broken moment, that I didn't know if I trusted him, not fully, not anymore. Why should I believe you? I whispered. He looked at me, not as an operative, not as a ghost, but as the man who once held me through storms. Because I would rather die, he said softly, than let them take you. I wish I could say I was brave. That I joined him, chose the truth, and helped burn that shadowed empire to the ground. But bravery is not always what people think. I walked away. I left him standing in that warehouse, alive but unreachable. Mine yet not mine. Because I knew if I joined him, if I stepped into his war, I'd lose the last shreds of myself I still recognized. When I got home, I burned it all, the photograph, the notes, the black envelope. I told myself it was for protection, to cut ties before they strangled my children. But deep down, I knew it was also because I couldn't carry the weight anymore. People say funerals bring closure. You bury the body, bury the grief, and walk forward. But what happens when the grave is empty, when the man you mourn walks in shadows, when your grief has nowhere to go? I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know if he ever escaped them. I don't know if my children are still pawns or players. But I know this, truth is not always a gift. Sometimes, it's a curse that rips the fabric of your life to shreds. And yet, I can't regret it. Because for one fleeting moment, I touched his hand again. I saw his eyes again. I heard the truth, however broken. That will haunt me forever. And it will sustain me forever. So when people ask why I live quietly now, why I avoid gatherings, why I never speak of the past, I simply smile and say, I have already buried a man who wasn't dead. After that, you see life differently. And sometimes, in the hollow quiet of the night, I still listen for it. A knock at the door. A voice in the dark. I am still alive. Trust no one. And when that moment comes, because I know it, Will, my heart will leap even as my soul shatters all over again.